my name is Brittany Henderson, and I'm gonna talk to you about the effective instruction and engaging an audience that we've been learning about. The component display theory is what I'll start off first, and what I learned from this was that you want to liken your material and make it relevant to your audience. There are a couple different ways that you can deliver information. You can do it through presenting, or showing, or telling. You can also ask questions, or even have your learners practice on each other. And there are two ways that you can give content, and there's generality and then there's instance. So we can do it by rules, definition, principles, or procedures. We can share those, or we can share specific events and examples or principles. So processes. And when we combine those two things, the delivery or different ways of delivering content, we can really focus on what we want our learners to come out of our lessons with, what we want them to achieve through listening to us. So how do we want them to bring the material home? We can modify our questions so that learners speak from their own knowledge, so they're not just spouting back answers like rote answers. Like I know in my class that I teach for Sunday school, I have 12 and 13-year-olds, and often if I don't make my questions good, they'll answer, we go to church, we go to church, we read our scriptures, we say our prayers. Those are the kind of answers that are pretty common, is to just give back rote answers. And with adults specifically, we need to be flexible throughout our lesson. We need to make sure that we're not getting like a teacher-pleasing thing. Our students are not answering. People aren't answering just because they want. They're trying to find what you want them to learn. So it needs to be open. And how do we engage learners? One of the things I learned from a different class is narrative strategy. And Marshall Gantz wrote this, and he said that the first thing we want to do is to tell a story about ourselves. So we're establishing authenticity with our audience. We're sharing personal observation. And then second is a story of us. So this is where you're getting your audience to participate with you. So how does what I say matter to you? How does it apply? Make your history their history. And then the story of now is engagement. What are we going to do about it? How are you going to take what we've learned and take it home, or challenge them? So you want to be genuine what you're sharing. And then so for personal preparation, you want to make sure that you have the Holy Ghost with you. We know as members that the only way you really learn is with the presence of the Holy Ghost. So we don't have to bring the church and the religion into what we're sharing necessarily, but we can do it beforehand so that we have it with us. So we need to prepare both spiritually and secularly. A good quote that I like is by Quintel Cook, and he says, values based on religious belief need to be part of public discourse. So we can combine them. You don't have to you don't have to share quotes from apostles, but what we believe is based on real world issues. So they're definitely relevant. How do we get participation? So we can offer methods that allow learners to use more than one sense. I remember I had a class where it was a teacher with child psychology in the classroom, and she had us lay down on the floor while she read a story. Now, that was really awkward. We're all adults, so we were laying on the floor probably about 10 minutes, and that was just really interesting. But I don't necessarily remember all she taught me, but I'll never forget that because it was so different. So doing stuff like that, making your class unique, and really helps to make it memorable. So you want to show excitement to what you're talking about. And something I've learned personally is you need to wait for answers. I have a tendency to just kind of, if there's an awkward silence, just kind of blow past it. But that silence is allowing them to think. So we need to make sure that we're patient. And then something also is you want to ask for their expertise. A lot of your learners, because they're going to be a lot of them will be adults, or even if they're not, they have their own experiences. They have their own history, so you can have them share it because it's definitely helpful. Something as a student, like to get our learner, is always nice is to get feedback from your teacher. So when someone answers a question, it's always really good to give them credit for it. So compliment them on something that you enjoyed about their comment, or thank them for asking, for answering. And I think a good thing also is to make sure that you reframe your any negatives that come up in your class. So reframe it in a positive way. That's really good. So sometimes you don't know the answer as a teacher. So what can you do? I think that just being honest and saying you don't know that builds a lot of trust. But we can also turn questions around. If you don't know the answer to something, you can say, what do you think will work? What have you seen others do? Or how would you apply that principle? So we don't have to know it. We don't have to know all the answers. We can also just save that question and remember it for the next time, and we can, get the information we need for it and then bring it back. So, and then what do you do when you disagree? So sometimes someone will say something and it's totally not what you agree with, or not what you're trying to help others learn. So how do you do that without making them not want to share anymore? Because you don't want to make them feel important, not important. So you can ask questions that reflects what you do agree about what their statement said. So usually there's always something someone says that you agree with, or in a roundabout way they were trying to say. So you can always turn it that way. And the one last thing I want to talk about is your boundaries. We should, as family life educators, we should definitely know the boundaries between when it's educating and when it becomes a therapy session, because we're not here to do a therapy session. So knowing when your learning is beginning, so you have to be careful listeners. And the spirit actually will help a lot with that. We can definitely feel when something is getting way too specific and we need to broaden it out. I think that is, as for that own personal knowledge, that's really what it's about, is making sure that it's broad enough to include everyone and not specific enough to only be focused on one person necessarily. Because when you get really specific, that's kind of when you veer off into the therapy, I think. And that's what I learned this week. Thanks. Or past couple of weeks.